Forever Dog.
Hello, Forever Dog listeners. I'm Allison Raskin.
And I'm Gabby Dunn.
And we host the podcast Just Between Us, which is available right here, right now on Forever Dog.
Just Between Us is a variety show that features listener questions, in-depth interviews, and topical topics.
We also play a game show called Hypotheticals. I could try to explain it to you, but the rules keep changing. I make the rules.
And I always lose. We're also joined each week by incredible guests, including disability activist Alice Wong, Planned Parenthood's Alexis McGill-Johnson, best-selling author and therapist Lori Gottlieb, and primatologist Kate Gilmore.
New episodes of Just Between Us drop every Wednesday. So while you're listening to this podcast, search for Just Between Us with Allison Raskin and Gabby Dunn. Hit that subscribe button and check us out.
Please.
Please.
Just between us.
This may come as a surprise, but my family is ready to get out of the house. So I did a search on the Vrbo app. They've got vacation homes anywhere your family wants to go. We found the perfect beach house that was just a drive away. It has an outdoor kitchen, a pool, and a game room for the kids, so we can really unwind and relax. Check out the Vrbo app for whatever kind of vacation your family needs. That's Vrbo, VRBO.com. Your together awaits.
When your first choice is a big old bus,
you turn around and boom, you end up with a sloppy seconds. Oh, diva. Dipper just took a bite of oatmeal. Our number is 213-536-9180. Our email is sloppysecondspod@gmail.com. Now on with he's about to take another bite. Show intro. Are you ready for some sloppy seconds? Hi, you stupid little fucks, you sloppy little fucks, you nasty little fucks, you dirty little fucks. It's me, Big Dipper, and that's Meatball. Welcome to Sloppy Second with Big Dipper and Meatball. Hello.
it's not oatmeal, it's kefir
Who is he?
with granola. It's like
I was just thinking about parfaits. I used to invite all the boys over in my little neighborhood. Well, no, okay, wait a minute. Our street only had boys on it. That was
But
like
I'm
every house
imagining
had
you
boys. So I would
as a
invite them all
very
over.
young kid walking down the street going, "Girl, guys, there's
Come
parfaits.
over for some parfaits. And my brother, and they would all come over and eat my little parfaits and then go and like play music or video games with my brother. But I was like, the soldiers are fed, you know?
You made like mini parfaits?
No,
like
I made big parfaits. I would make my mom go buy like a tub of plain Greek yogurt and then strawberries, blueberries, sometimes a little pineapple, sometimes a little mango. You put a little, blackberry or boysenberry jelly.
Lime with the coconut?
And you mix it all up. Anyway, how are you doing? So
I'm
you're
okay.
eating kefir and granola.
Kefir. Yeah, drinkable
Kefir Sutherland
yogurt is what I called it. You know, when I was younger, I used to call Parmesan cheese shake cheese. Because you shake it out of the thing.
You gotta shake it out. But that's the craft stuff.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we weren't... it wasn't really on and popping over there at the Baby
What
Dipper
came
house.
first? Kefir as the thing or kefir as a name?
Ooh.
It's definitely kefir, by the way.
Wow.
But it's Kiefer Sutherland, who
Yeah.
one time I saw blackout drunk and made out with my male friend in a bar.
Wait, say it again. Kiefer Sutherland was blackout drunk and
He
made
was
out with your friend who
with
was
my
a male person.
friend. Yes.
Oh, is he a guy? Maybe he's a guy.
I've heard that he might do that. He hangs out at that one bar a lot.
Which one?
It's over by. Do you know Patty's in?
Do you know Patty's?
It's right over by Bob's Big Boy Burgers. Anyway,
I pulled a review that I felt was particularly triggering for me.
Ooh, you did it. See, you just did it.
I wanted to read it aloud. This is a 5-star review from someone whose screen name is C Wagner 88.
Wow, you're really calling him out.
What's interesting about this is I used to fuck a guy named Wagner.
And was he 33, 32?
No, he asked me again his age. Of course, you know, he was much, much older. But this feels like it could be him. Anyhow.
Oh, he was 88. I thought that was a year, not the age.
This says love, but that's the title. The review says, I adore this podcast. Big Dipper. The throat clearing is out of control. Some examples. Now, is he saying I clear my throat a lot, or is he using throat clearing as a term?
Well, I think he's using it as a term. I think
as like a transition.
As like a transitional term. He's
he
saying
says,
that you transition.
Here are some examples, and then in quotes. So I have a question. I want to talk about. Let's transition into talking about as an art. This is the one. This one gets me. As an artist, because I do love to say as an artist, I really find it interesting that as I'm moving into my apartment, and then he writes or they write, just say what you're gonna say. All love. Bye.
I mean, that's a drag. Also, we kind of texted back and forth, but I was like, I think that those are necessary in order to transition from whatever chaos I'm talking about. Because I'll go on a tangent that has nothing to do with what we're talking about, and you have to bring it back. That's the whole...
Parfaits! Come get your parfaits,
baby!
But to me, it's like, it is the equivalent of raising your hand in class and then saying, I have a question. I'm curious about, right, that you haven't yet said anything. All you've said is like filler words to say your question.
Yes. Do you know what that reminds me of? Is when I was in acting school, which I realized was just like long form torture, was they taught us to never say just. Is that something that you ever had to learn? Like like when I'm talking about something, I was like, oh yeah, I just got on stage and da-da-da-da-da. And they're like, no, you got on stage and you did that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because it's a way of demeaning. So maybe you're trying to, I don't know.
I know I say like too much. That is for damn sure.
Yeah. Well, we all do. It's part of our generation.
It's generational.
Generational trauma, baby.
Girl.
Ooh, ah!
Ooh. How long do you think you could hold that note for?
Wait, hold on. Hold on.
10, 11, 12, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. 2, 4.
Put me on Broadway, baby. I can hold a, what was that, 21-second note? Ooh.
I counted 24. But did you also get digital interference? Did you hear that? What was that?
That was the ghost of Shoshana Bean coming up saying, don't come from my sustained note, Mama Miss Ma'am. I can hear it through the internet.
I love that. Amazing. Well, listen, this was fun.
Wait, for a second, I was like,
what?
now you do it.
No.
I feel like that's 1 full minute of air.
Of just doing nothing.
Just making noise.
As if we don't put people through enough listening to this show. Jesus Christ. We're here 2 times a week, and then we just do this shit in your ears?
Yeah, what else should we talk about?
We appreciate you. That's one thing that I am uninterested in doing on the show. Talking about what else should we talk about while we're recording the show. I think we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to have our special guests. You know, there is a lot to be pissed off and annoyed about these days, but honestly, I wake up in a good mood every morning.
Ooh, why is that?
Well, my mattress, gal. It's so comfortable, I can't help but wake up in a good mood. Feeling good, feeling great. How are you?
Oh, that's the tea, Mama. Helix Sleep makes personalized mattresses made right here in America and shipped straight to your door with free no-contact delivery, free returns, and a 100-night sleep-free trial.
To choose your mattress, Helix makes a quiz that takes just 2 minutes to complete and matches your body type and sleep preferences to the perfect mattress for you.
If you like a mattress that's really soft or firm, you sleep on your side or your back or your stomach, or you sleep really hot or you sleep really cold. With Helix, there's a specific mattress for each and everybody's unique taste.
How do you sleep? I literally sleep on my back, on my side, on my stomach. I'm like
You roll. You're a barrel roller.
I'm Tina Turner.
I start sleeping on my stomach, but I roll throughout the night too, which is kind of annoying for Michael, which is why we got the California king size baby, because there's enough room for both of us, and I don't bother him.
I love the thought of having a mattress that fits with how you sleep, because we all do it differently. So
yeah.
So just go to helixsleep.com/sloppy, take their 2-minute sleep quiz, and they'll match you to a customized mattress that will give you the best sleep of your life.
Yeah, they have a 10-year warranty, and you get to try it out for 100 nights, risk-free. They'll even pick it up for you if you don't love it. But trust me, you will.
So right now, Helix is offering up to $200 off all mattress orders.
Get up to $200 off at helixsleep.com/sloppy. Welcome back to Sloppy Seconds. This is a weird segment where we have this is weird because we normally talk before this.
Well, we're just going to start. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back, everybody. And now let's introduce our new special guest, an activist, a filmmaker, a fixture in the queer art world, honey. It's Leo Herrera.
Hello.
Hello.
Your last name has a lot of R's in it. Do you give it a little roll of the R? Herrera?
If I have to, I'll go Herrera.
Ooh.
Herrera.
Better not do that again.
Hi, thanks for being here. You're joining us from New Orleans.
I did. I moved to New Orleans for a while. From San
where?
Francisco. From San Francisco.
Oh.
I usually split my time between both cities. And I have a bio family here, including my gay brother. So she's spending the winter here.
And your brother primarily does fashion design, right? Costume design.
Yeah, he does costumes. Yeah. So
The
usually
dynamic
this is
duo.
Yes, we are that.
I first met you. I don't actually remember when I first met you. I remember being very intimidated by you.
Really?
Oh, yes, very much so. Because everyone knows who you are. Like, you're very much that person who's like next to the famous person. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, like when you go to the nightclub and you see the like flashy person that everybody knows, but then you see
like the DJ
huddled in the corner, like talking to the person. You're like, that's the real mover and shaker.
Ooh.
I feel like that is you, because every party, every city, and I first became aware of you when I started traveling to do gigs, and I was like, bitch, she's in San Francisco, she's in New York. Like, I was like, what's going on? She knows everybody.
We have a whole little collection of selfies because I always grab you because it's always like the randomest like bear party in like Austin or bear, or, you know, like it'll be Southern Decadence, and I have like a little tiny like Big Dipper collection of selfies I like to take because it's always so random.
Because you've lived everywhere, right? Sorry, go ahead, Meatball.
We're going to ask the same question.
Same question.
Yeah, I lived in San Francisco for a long time and then moved to New York for a while. But I traveled a lot for my work. And that's kind of the main thing that I've always tried to center my work around, is just traveling and seeing like how different queer like groups live and party and do art as many places as I can in the United States. So that's probably why you always see me being that guy.
Yeah.
In all of these random ass spots. So then it'll be like Big Dipper's performing at this bar, and oh my god, it's gonna be hilarious because I'm like, hey bitch.
It is truly, and it like adds to the mystique and the magic to be like, what the fuck? She's everywhere.
I know, because I just watched the 45-minute version of your movie, and
oh, did you?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, my favorite part was the surprise fisting. I didn't see it coming, and then out of nowhere, there it was. Whole room of guys getting fisted. And I don't know if you know this about me, but I am very intrigued by fisting. So I have a lot of questions about what was that day on set like?
That's that, like, I'm sort of not supposed to say which party that is, but if you guessed it, you could guess it. It's like one of the largest leather circuit parties in the world, and it's held in New York. So, and, you know, you could put two and two together.
Yeah.
So that was actually filmed at that event. I was allowed a camera. They allowed me a camera for the first time. And that's actually happening. Like, that's the scene that they're doing. Like, those guys, like, I didn't set that up. That's actually
because some of them seem like they were like, oh, there's a camera in here. Let me give them the double 1, 2. Pop, pop.
Oh, and you know, those queens are like that too.
Yeah.
So it's like a lot of performers, and they have like live, you know, this is a 30-year-old, 40-year-old party. And so it's like they do live sex shows. And I've worked with the promoter for such a long time. And when I was doing Fathers, I had this episode, because it was told in episodes when it first came out. And there was one about Robert Mapplethorpe. And I thought, well, you know, I messaged the promoter and I was like, what would you think about having a scene in Father shot there? And I knew it was going to be a long shot. And he was like, fuck it, just come on down. So I was there for like 18 hours. And then the fisting scene happened at like 4 a.m. And
well,
so
yeah,
like
they gotta
everything
loosen up their holes. They couldn't just jump right in.
And then like two guys had to get switched out at the last minute. So like getting all of the consent forms and messaging everybody to let them know what that was about. And like one of those people is actually my really good friend from San Francisco. So that's why I like to travel and do all that stuff. So Fathers was able to give me this like access to so many really cool things. And that fisting scene is like, it's hard for me to look at sometimes because it's so intense, but it's about Robert Mapplethorpe. So it was like, am I really going to stick a fisting scene in the middle of this thing? Like, how am I going to get this scene? How am I going to like put this on social media? And that was like a whole journey, but it was like, go big or go home.
Right. Well, I want to back up because Meatball jumped us into the fucking deep end before we even got started. So I want to do a frame of reference to sort of share with the listeners what we're even talking about, which is this like massive film project that you've been working on for how many years?
Like 5 years now. I'm going into the 6th one. I mean, it's sort of done, but it's like a project that it sort of just keeps growing, and like it's got a sort of a life of its own.
So, you know, we both have obviously, like, Meatball just watched, and like I've been aware of this for a while. You know, how about this? We'll tell you what it is, and then you can correct us.
Awesome.
So it is a film project about what if we lived in a world where the AIDS epidemic did not steal an entire generation of queer people from us.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. So
you did it.
Starring.
I've been calling it the AIDS. I've been calling it the AIDS pandemic because it's still a pandemic, and there's a lot of political reasons why we don't call it a pandemic.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So, the project started like 5 years ago at the start of PrEP, when PrEP came out.
Yeah.
And how there was so many inter-community discussions about what PrEP meant, and, you know, the slut shaming and all of those like really intense conversations that we were having.
Yeah.
And sort of coming into the realization that I couldn't get a good answer from a lot of the activists that I knew whether or not I should go on this pill, and realizing really like from a heart place that we're missing so many mentors, and that there was nobody for me to call at that point. So you sort of realize, and I've always studied the AIDS pandemic and the beginnings of it. And I've always really been intrigued by pandemics in general. And it kind of just took a life of its own of like, well, what if this thing didn't exist? And what if all of these activists were here to be mentors for us? And how different would our world be? And also it's really fascinating to me how much AIDS shapes who we are. And how much it's shaped it through. I mean, it's been around for decades now. So, I mean, we're as old as the AIDS epidemic. I was born in 1981. So, I'd have like activists tell me like, "Oh, you were born in 1981. I have antibodies that are older than you."
Right. Yeah, I've heard that before.
Yeah.
Not from activists, but other people.
Right, from daddies.
Yeah, exactly. But okay, but not to cut you off, but I'm curious about epidemic versus pandemic, because when COVID first started swirling, there was a lot of conversation of like, what's a pandemic versus an epidemic, and why do we call these things epidemics? So you just very clearly said you call it the AIDS pandemic, meaning
there's no
ongoing?
official, I mean, there's a lot of overlap between an epidemic and a pandemic, but a pandemic is basically just worldwide, which that's what AIDS fits it. I think, and everybody has a different opinion about it. And it's just the conversation about the language is really interesting to me. And one of the biggest viral posts that I had last year was that I just simply called it a pandemic. And this is our second pandemic. And a pandemic is like a contagion that is spread throughout the globe. Right. That's really just the definition of it. And so like the World Health Organization calls it an epidemic now, but during the beginning and up till 2006, they're still calling it a pandemic. And so those are sort of interchangeable, but there's something sort of politicized about calling it an epidemic because an epidemic makes it a smaller sort of a country's problem, right? And so it makes it really easy for us to forget that AIDS is still affecting the rest of the world because we don't fucking think about Africa,
Right, we're
so
like,
it's
American and it's gay, and so we're just going to isolate it.
Yeah,
right.
So that tunnel vision's really interesting, and as soon as you sort of open that up and call it a pandemic, all of a sudden it just opens up this whole discussion about what that is and how we're still dealing with it, and so it's really, really fascinating. And I think the language around epidemics and pandemics, I think, is something that I think is really fascinating, and we saw so much of that this year.
Yeah, so much of it.
So I want to talk about the slut shaming around PrEP because I remember that conversation.
Oof.
How did you feel, Meatball? Do you take PrEP?
No,
I don't think you do.
No,
right? No.
But I did for a little while. But then I got into like a committed relationship, and so I was like, this is unnecessary for me.
Right.
Also, it's so expensive. You started the episode of Fathers like that, but it's truly, if you don't have the right health insurance, it could be upwards of like $600, $700 a month to keep yourself from like...
Yeah, it was like $1,600 when it came out.
Yeah, and didn't they try to sue that guy or like get him to make it cheaper? And he was like, no, thanks.
Well, Gilead, the pharmaceutical company that produces PrEP, basically what they did was really messed up, which is they let gay doctors and gay activists sort of do the research for PrEP, and they let taxpayers pay for it. Right. And then they kept their mouths shut during this whole discussion because they were like, let the queens figure it out. And they didn't have any guidelines. Yeah, exactly.
Let the
and
queens
they didn't have
figure it out.
They'll figure it out if they want to fuck each other raw. They'll always make it work. Which is what a lot of it came down to. And I am of the mindset that it's in nobody's best interest for gay men to have free and carefree, pleasurable sex. So if you ask activists, they'll worry about the STD rates, which is, a totally true thing. And if you ask like doctors, they'll worry about the side effects. And if you ask, religious people, we're not even going to get into that now. So all of a sudden the discussion became like, well, I got into a serodiscordant relationship for the first time, which meant that my partner was HIV positive and I was HIV negative. Mm-hmm. And so then that became a really big issue because the only times I've ever not worn condoms are with partners. So all of a sudden it becomes this like real issue that we're having. And a lot of people were in those kinds of relationships when a lot of people were young and they wanted to not wear condoms and worry about it. I mean, how old are you guys?
I'm 35.
I'm 30.
Yeah, so I'm 39. So I came of age where like there was no, HIV treatments much when I was really young. Mm-hmm. And, I grew up in Arizona where it was like abstinence only education, which just scared the shit out of you throughout your teens. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of trauma that we have, especially people that are my age and a little older. In terms of like the shame that comes with not wearing a condom once, right. Like going out and partying and like waking up the next morning and not knowing exactly what happened or like,
I miss it.
There's so many different risks. What'd you say?
Nothing.
She said she misses it.
Oh God, I miss it so bad. I miss the old world.
No, but I know what you mean about the shame of like the abstinence thing. In Texas, they told us like our sex ed class was like, here's how your penis works. Here's how you come, and then never go anywhere near someone else's privates. And that was like it.
Or it'll just gonna get like cauliflower's growth.
Yeah, it was like a lot of like scared, like if you have sex, you'll get a VD and then you'll die.
Mm-hmm. Die. Yeah, syphilis and AIDS, and you will die.
Oh, AIDS was such a huge deal there.
Yeah.
Wait, I have a question because we were able to make a vaccine for COVID in such a short amount of time. And I know there's been scientists working on the AIDS vaccine since like the early 90s. What is the delay? Is it just that they're literally being like, this is a gay person problem, this has nothing to do with us, so we don't care?
I mean, a lot of it is that, for sure. The lack of, especially now that we have a treatment for it, it's not in anybody's interest to make us stop taking a $1,600 a month pill.
Right. Because you see, it's a constant revenue stream.
Right.
The PrEP,
so that's not
the PrEP and then the HIV drugs versus a vaccine that avoids the problem.
Do you remember the AIDS Healthcare Foundation? Is that what it's called? Anyway, these huge, it's an industry. AIDS is an enormous, enormous industry around the world in terms of like funding and in terms of marketing and everything. So there's all of these enormous machines it's not in their best interest for us to just get a shot and be finished with it. Having said that, AIDS and HIV is like a really, really difficult virus to deal with. So I haven't taken a huge deep dive into the COVID vaccines, but I also,
will you be getting one?
What'd you say?
Will you be getting one?
The corona vaccine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm gagging for it. I'm so ready.
Especially because you're in New Orleans, which is like such an amazing city to like be in. It's one of my favorite cities of all time.
Yeah.
But I have a question about New Orleans. What is the gay scene like there? Because every time I've gone, it's been like a family vacation, and then it's been like dinner's over, and I like run around trying to find a gay bar or something. I took my mom to a drag bar. I think it was called Lucky Pierre's or something.
Oh yeah.
And one of the drag queens there was also a world champion alligator wrestler, and she looked rough stuff. So I was like, Mom, I promise drag is better than this. So what is the gay scene in New Orleans like?
It's like in every city, there's like, your top 40. A lot of it's tourist based too. So I've been really lucky that like a lot of the really best parties, and the best things are taking place in some like dilapidated warehouse, like,
yes, Ma.
a mile from the French Quarter. But it's really fun to just get fucked up in the French Quarter in this Fruit Loop of all of these bars. It's just like a drinking mall. So there's all of these like underground great parties because there's so much space here and everything's so much cheaper. But you have to sort of like know people to know where to go. But at the same time, I love taking my friends out on that French Quarter tour. Obviously, none of that's happening here. I just moved here just to switch my quarantine up. I haven't, done any of it. And then if you go down to the French Quarter right now, all the fucking worst people without a mask on coming from all sorts of places in the South are here. And so there's that sort of level of disconnect that, I'm not about to try off on this trip. But otherwise, it's one of my favorite. It's my favorite place. I think it's the most American city I've ever been to.
Well, okay, let's take a quick break, and then we're going to, we'll be right back.
We'll be right back.
Okay, so we are back, and I'm curious. I don't want to. I find your work. I remember I was in Chicago, and I ended up down at Smart Bar during the day, and you were giving a talk about queer spaces, right? You were giving a talk about. So the thing that I love about what you do, as a filmmaker, as a commentator, I would say, if there was a national cable queer network, you would be a regular pundit talking about world issues. Like what I love about what you do is like, you're very joyful and there's a lot of humor, but you're also incredibly poignant. And something as of late, you've been posting a lot of commentary and your take on COVID and, the whole Gays Over COVID Instagram account, everything that's happening in Puerto Vallarta, like all of these places or all of these things that are happening around COVID and the sort of direct correlation to the timeline of what happened around HIV and AIDS. And so I mostly wanted to hear you talk about that on the show.
All right then.
Not to,
Well,
like,
cut all that other stuff out.
No, we're happy to talk about it all. I know Meatball always likes to keep things light, but like I find this all very fascinating.
Yes.
You know what's kind of ironic about it is I worked on Fathers for 5 years, and I was pretty convinced that I was done with it. I finished the 45-minute cut of it. It was the hardest I've ever had to work in my life. It was such emotional work, and it was so like draining in every way imaginable. And it was so exhausting, and it was mostly just me doing all the filming. And I thought like, okay, I finished it. It's done. I'm like, I'm going to spend next year not talking about AIDS, not talking about a pandemic. I'm going to move on to other things.
No!
Oh, and then all this, I've been working on this novel for a while. And the irony is that I've been working on this novel for like 15 years. It's like that. It's that thing it's that Mount Everest I keep climbing. And it always was about San Francisco recovering from a pandemic, because it was supposed to be this like allegory to AIDS. And like the most used word in it is quarantine. Like there's a quarantine nightclub, and then there's like these phases of quarantine where everybody's stuck in the city. So I've been working on this thing for a long time, and I thought, okay, I'm going to just spend most of next year working on this novel about this like shadow pandemic and this metaphor for AIDS. And I start to see the word quarantine come up in China a lot in the beginning of the year, because they quarantined, with 35 million people or whatever. And then all of a sudden I realized like, holy shit, we're going to be in another pandemic. Like this is happening. And the last time I traveled was when I was here in New Orleans for Mardi Gras. And we didn't realize that COVID was here. And that ended up being an enormously huge, super spreading event. Like people that I knew were sick with COVID while we were here. A lot of people died after that, especially a lot of older people in these crews that, put Mardi Gras together. And so when we got back to San Francisco, I sort of did the math on everything. Like I was like, wait, how is this thing spread? And what do you have to do? And how many deaths are there? And then I realized, holy shit, like this thing is coming, and Americans are so awful. This is going to take us years. And if you know anything about pandemic behavior, like the Spanish flu or AIDS, we follow a very specific track of thinking when it comes to disease as human beings that I think is really, really fascinating. And I've always thought it was really fascinating. I just never thought I would have to live through something like that, So that was really scary.
What is that track of thinking?
It's like we have these like weird patterns of denial, and like depending on how long it takes for it to make itself seen, like how long the symptoms take, the way that we track it, the way that we talk about it, the way that we don't talk about it. It's really sort of fascinating, but it's really scary. And sort of being that in the beginning of it, and seeing the level of disinformation, and then watching what Trump was doing with like the masks in the same way that we've experienced condom use before. And like, so all of these like sort of parallels started to become really like aware to people that were either like in the AIDS field, or like elders were sort of like, they were started to get like the hairs in the back of their neck standing up around really early March. And then I thought, holy shit, like this is going to be a huge thing, and this is going to end in hundreds of thousands of deaths, and this is going to surpass AIDS in the death toll. And sort of knowing that back in March and April, because of what you're studying and with your job, and talking to other nurses and doctors and other activists, and it's just like, oh, we're going into this thing that's going to be really, really, really scary for everybody, and really confusing, because pandemics. I can
just imagine you just clickety clacking over to Dr. Fauci, being like, "Listen up, this faggot knows what's going on."
Girl, Fauci was around.
Fauci is part of AIDS history in a huge way.
Yes.
So as soon as Dr. Fauci popped up, I was like, oh my God, this is like the weirdest rerun ever. And Dr. Fauci was really protested against during. Like a lot of Dr. Fauci's reaction to COVID is directly because of the work that he did with AIDS activists. There's a straight line through so much of this. It's overwhelming. It's really emotional. And so I started to just sort of jot down my feelings, because I was seeing my friends be really confused and really scared. And so this was sort of my way of being like, okay, we've done this before. let me acknowledge our elders because they're really scared that we're going to just get them all killed and not listening to certain things. And then I'm also in San Francisco at the time. So luckily our health officials and our politicians really heeded that response because of the fact that that city had already been through an epidemic or a pandemic. And so at some point and then you're also stuck in the house. So I'm like, I'm just going to start to I'm going to write to myself in these posts. So I'm really just having a conversation with myself and trying to calm myself down with these posts that nobody was really following my Instagram really at the time. So these are sort of conversations that I'm having with myself of like, okay, this is, you're going to be weird after this. This is going to be something that's going to change the way that your body moves, or it's okay to be too careful. Remember, this is your second pandemic. So I would write those feelings down in these tiny little capsules and then send them out into, the Instagram thing. And then they started to catch on. And then all of a sudden I started to sort of speak to people's like emotions and feelings about their feeling, and then give them a historical context, which I think people were really grateful for. And then before I knew it, like I was checking my followers, and all of a sudden I'm like, why is there so many like white women following me all of a sudden?
Oh,
and
no.
because I know I was terrified. No, no, and it was because I'd hit into these like pockets of people that have like immunocompromised children and they're disabled. And so I hit like into these like disabled communities that were like, I don't know how to explain to my family why I can't go to this family reunion, or I can't like, explain to my kid why we're not doing this. And these posts are sort of helping me process that. And at the same time, getting a lot of messages from elders being like, thank you, because we've been screaming about AIDS for so long that it falls differently when we say it.
So I'm curious about the whole PV traveling, partying situation, because there is some psychology, and you've hit on it a little bit. I mean, it's like there is some psychology to like ignoring it, or this isn't my problem, or that sort of thing. And almost like generationally, like, people in their early 20s, it's like they don't have the reverence for the older generation, and they didn't have the same type of history lesson when it comes to AIDS. But what the fuck? Like, what's the hot take on those people? Like, what the hell? Like, I don't know.
The first thing I think we have to acknowledge with all of that is that behavior is a failure of government. And a failure of messaging at the very, very top. And so it does us all a disservice to sort of just blame each other, because we aren't taught those things. Like, like a lot of these people that are doing this, they're like in their early 20s, for example, and they've never known what it's like to get an HIV test that you're really freaked out about, for example, or they've never known somebody to die of AIDS, or they've never seen somebody, become addicted to meth in response to their AIDS, results. And so there's so much of it going on. Having said that, a lot of the thing that separates COVID from AIDS and from HIV is that, HIV and AIDS is between two people, or an orgy, but like it's an inter-community thing, and it's a community discussion. The issue with COVID is that you aren't, this isn't about the guy you're fucking. This is about the Uber driver and the delivery guy and the cashier the next day and the lady who cleans your house. And, all of a sudden it just becomes this chain, and disease and epidemics and pandemics, like they hit into some like denialist, survivalist thing with us. And if you don't have the right messaging, and if you don't have a government that's telling you, straight up what's happening, you're going to resort to a lot of behavior that's really bad for the community health. And a lot of people forget that like Ronald Reagan didn't say the word AIDS for like 4 years.
Right.
True. They laughed about us when it was brought up.
Fully.
So there's so much precedent to that. And so it was also like a reminder to people, especially in the beginning of this thing, when Trump already knew, when it was obvious to a lot of us who study epidemics and pandemics that he already knew that it was as severe as we suspected it was. Yeah. And his reaction was so like, oh, don't worry about it. Don't wear masks. Don't. it was so gross, but we have a historical precedent to that. So it's this idea of like, the government has tried to kill us with this before. And as soon as they found out it was mostly Black and brown people, it's the same reaction as when they found out it was mostly gays.
Yeah.
So it's such a failure of messaging, and it's such a failure of history, but we gay people have to redefine themselves every single generation because we don't have the ability to pass down knowledge to each other. We don't have school courses. We don't have, but so much of our generation before us died of AIDS. So they weren't able to pass down a lot of that knowledge. So you have this whole year where you're watching that behavior sort of continue. But I feel like at the end of this year, like, you can't make any more excuses up. Like, you can't say, I didn't know. I went to fucking PV. You can't do that.
Well, that was my issue with the PV thing. It's like, it's getting worse, not better. Like, we've been doing this for close to a year, at least 6 months. You've known about it.
The fuck
and you
makes
still
you think
decide
that Puerto
to go?
Vallarta is better?
Right.
Yeah.
Because there's no rules and restrictions, and people just think like, oh, because that city has decided to not say anything, they're fine with it.
But then
nobody will have Americans.
Right. Girl, and the ones that really got me are the ones who got the vaccine 2 days before, the ICU nurses who then hopped on a plane knowing that vaccine doesn't take hold until the second dose comes into play, and then you still have to wait many, many weeks, and it's not about you. Okay. But what I wanted to say,
it's very emotional.
Here's I get mad, I get heated. But what I will say,
what I wanted to say, what were you going to say, Meatball?
Well, you were saying something about this generation, like, not knowing stuff. And I do have to credit, like, this new generation that's coming up, because they do spread information through each other much faster, whether it be through, like, YouTube or fucking TikTok or whatever they're on.
Don't act like you don't know, Queen, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm like, don't act like you don't fucking know, because it's everywhere. You can't look anywhere without seeing it or seeing the numbers.
Which is why, on top of all that, there is a colonizer vibe to it.
Oh,
that's why, and that was what really struck the nerve in my open letter to the PV gays, because it's just like, shut the fuck up, bitch. Like, you know what you're doing. You know that you're going to a government. You can't go to Europe. Like, why do you think you can't go to Europe? And you're sitting there saying, like, the government's letting us. Okay, well, what is our government doing? Like, you're watching our government actively try to let this thing run rampant. Okay. And then you're saying, like, oh, well, we're giving them money, which is like, okay, if you care so much about the fucking, like, economy of PV, then find a soup kitchen and send some donations. Right.
You don't have to go down there, go to a circuit party and hand deliver your groceries and donations. You can just ship them on down there.
Exactly. And then there was also, like, the other facet of, like, well, I have antibodies. I saw this queen, like, and then I saw these, like, queens posting pictures of them with a shirt that said antibodies. And it's like, we don't even know the science behind it.
Yeah, we don't know what's going to happen.
Like, skip it. You don't even know. This is like an alien invasion. So spare me, Kevin from fucking accounting at, some company in New York. Like, you don't fucking know what's going on with that. And then at the end of it, then you're also, like, posting about it, and you're setting an example to everybody else to think this is okay. So by then it's just like you've done like 5 shitty things.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden you want to not be shamed, and you want to not be called out, and you want to enjoy your vacation. You're not going to have your cake and eat it too right now. Like, it's just not going to happen, because there are AIDS activists who literally died for you to have these rights to go to PV and fucking do all that shit. And you have these people that died, and then you have these other people that survived that are holed up in their apartments watching you do this, like having a late stage crisis in their lives, because they're thinking, like, all the work that I did was for nothing for these fucking ungrateful little bitches. And so you have to have someone like me that's just going to come in and be like, okay.
Yeah, I think they need to be shamed. I talked to Nicole because we both, like, send each other videos back and forth all the time of just, like, huge parties and stuff. And we always just say, like, I feel insane. I feel like I'm going crazy. I feel like I am part of a cult that believes in something that doesn't exist because they're behaving like this. And they see...
But it's the other way around.
I know. But it like
And that's
doesn't
what the
help that I'm
issue was.
seeing it and just like, why have I been stuck in my house? I haven't left anywhere. I haven't seen
Right.
anybody.
I loved one of your posts that I don't have it right in front of me, but where you basically were like, you can wait. You can hold off. There'll be another dick to suck. There'll be another party to go to. The behavior that you're participating in by staying home is saving your future. And that really stuck to me because I think, especially in like the age of internet, we all have this like FOMO feeling where we're really just like, we want to be a part of everything. And I just thought that was really like a poignant idea of like patience and like thinking about the other people around you. And I want to say to like people listening who are sort of like tapped out on this topic, because I feel it too. We can't tap out when like it's history, right? Like what I love about your perspective is that, you know, if you want to talk about HIV and AIDS in the 80s versus HIV and AIDS today, it's a much better picture today. It's still fucked up, but it's a much better picture today. So having that context to draw the line between the two gives me hope for the future of how we're going to be operating in a society where coronavirus is a thing that exists and people are vaccinated for it and we talk about it. And it's not, remember that one weird blip of a year that completely disappeared? Like this has been etched into stone and the rest of our life will happen and we will have this recollection. Like it's not going anywhere. And so I just really appreciate that about the context that you
Thank you. And I think I know which post you're talking about. And that was me talking to myself. It was me telling myself like, it's okay for you to trust your gut on COVID. And it's okay. The post you're talking about is the blue one because I color code them.
Yes.
And it says, and it says, it's okay to feel too careful. It's okay to miss parties. Yeah. Oh, well, you can read it.
Yeah, it's okay.
You know how to read.
It's okay to miss parties, friends, and sex because you're listening to your gut on COVID. Yeah, there's still so much to understand, and we don't really know it yet. Fucking yeah.
And also, you know, I was talking to myself because, you know, like we were talking about earlier, Meatball, about like our sex ed stuff. Like I was taught that if you touched a dick, your mouth would fall off and AIDS would jump into through your eyes. You know, like we had such horrible abstinence only teachings in Texas and Arizona.
And they told us everyone would know because you'd be covered in lesions. They know you're a sinner.
Just covered it. You're like your eye like is half closed. But so I gave my first blowjob with a condom because I thought that's what I was supposed to do.
Very Lady Bunny. Very Lady Bunny.
It was very like, you know, late, like, you know, 80s, like mid 90s kind of thing. And I was having a really difficult time at that time because a lot of my friends were sort of tapping out and having like secret little gatherings and secret little things. And, you know, I was, you know, we live in a small community no matter where we are. So we always find out each other's business. And I was starting to get that feeling you were talking about. Like, am I going crazy? Like I'm seeing these things happen or I'm like, why do I feel like people are cheating on me when they're going to these secret parties? And so I sat down. That's the feeling. It's like you're getting cheated on by somebody. Yes. Like, the last time I got,
but by all the fags I used to trust.
Exactly. So that's going to take us years to unpack, right? And we've all made a mental list of who did what during this, which is what you're talking about. It's history. We're living it right now, and the choices that we're making right now are going to be etched in our minds for a very long time. And so that specific weekend was really difficult. Because I was having the like, are you crazy? And then I thought like, you know, you gave a blowjob with a condom, a strawberry flavored condom. It was a terrible blowjob, of course, because it was a strawberry flavored condom.
Now, how long does the flavor last? Longer than Big Red chewing gum?
Less. You know what? Like zebra gum. Remember zebra gum?
Oh my God. 15 seconds and it's
like
gone.
Nothing. It's gone. So and so I remember being like, okay, I never look back at that blowjob and regret it because it was part of my care journey. Like it was part of this thing. And when I realized that like, oh, HIV is actually harder to catch than I was told, this is going to be a process. So I wrote that to myself. And part of it's like, you know, we don't look back at, even though the AIDS pandemic cost us so many moments, we don't look back at it and say, I should have taken more risks that one time. I didn't need to wear a condom that one time. That's not how humans work after the fact. And so what I say in that post is that the FOMO isn't going to be what you remember the most. What you're going to remember the most, what's unforgettable is moments where you set your guard down and then you end up, doing something that gets somebody killed. The FOMO isn't going to be what you remember. It's going to be these moments that you protected others. It's not going to be lost revelries. Like, it's not going to be the parties that you missed. Like, and so that was the post that was picked up by a lot of like disabled folk because it spoke to them in a different way. And I didn't see that coming, but all of a sudden I got a lot of letters from a lot of moms that were like, this has been a really, like, your Instagram account has been really helpful. And meanwhile, I'm like, all my Instagram accounts that have been is like dudes partying, like everywhere.
Yeah, I was like, don't scroll down too far, Nancy.
Don't scroll down, please.
So
the Instagram that we're talking about is Herrera Images, by the way. So you can all go watch and see.
And something else. Well, okay, so let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. And I want to talk about one other thing. Also on your Instagram, you have compiled these like beautiful video sequences where you've basically like underscored a bunch of super right-wing Trump TikToks, and you basically give liberals a little window into a whole other side of social media that we don't look at. And I don't want to go too deep down in this because we're recording this the day before the inauguration. My hope is that we're gonna we'll
also,
see what happens.
I'd like to ask you about Lady MAGA because we almost had her on the show.
Talking about her because I was listening to you guys' older podcast and I listened to the Alaska one, and you were talking about Lady MAGA, which is, I mean, oh God, it's such a
I'll character study in itself.
No, the question is
thoughts.
Thoughts? What's the analysis?
What do you got going on? Why does she hate herself?
Well, I think one of the things that I wanted to do, I mean, a lot of my work deals with like looking at really dark subjects and trying to sort of twist them around.
And for a white person, she's awful dark.
Oh my God. And so I started to go down MAGA TikTok, like when because we're dealing with this pandemic, and at the same time, there's this moment of racial reckoning that's slamming right into it, right? And I'm a queer Mexican immigrant who grew up undocumented in one of the worst, most unkind places to immigrants, So it's, it was really scary in so many ways because you have this pandemic that's killing people that look like my parents. And then you have all these like overlaps, and then all these Karen videos started coming out. And I realized I had so much like Karen trauma from growing up in Arizona.
Wow.
And that was like a really real thing that I had never sort of like looked face to face at. And I don't know exactly how it happened, but I was like, I'm going to sort of do like exposure therapy and go down these like MAGA TikToks when everybody got into TikTok. And I realized there's this whole side of social media that's specifically tailored for all of this stuff. And so I started to do these MAGA meltdown videos of just like how funny they are because they're just so campy and they're so unself-aware that they're in a cult, most of them. At least the ones that are posting. I think it's really unfair to just lump all Trump supporters into one thing. But the ones that are taking the time to do these TikTok videos and whole ass accounts based on this red hat personality trait is really fascinating because they're the ones that, of course, came in not wearing their face condoms, right? And creating a whole culture based on not wearing protection, which gay people have done. We did it with porn and barebacking. So all of these things are swirling around. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of it, I see that there's all these fucking MAGA gays. And it's just like,
Christian Walker Model.
Here we go. And then here comes Lady MAGA. And it's just like a gift from heaven in the middle of deepest quarantine.
I'm imagining you discovering this and like in the same time your heart sinks for like their sheer existence, but this like evil smile comes across your face.
Oh, and you can hear. So whenever I do a video with her, because I pick like theme songs for them.
Yeah,
so
you
I
have a
these,
whole
like,
slideshow on her on your Instagram.
I have a whole series of them. And so for her, I always choose a cover of Streets of Philadelphia from the movie Philadelphia, which is sort of an old reference, but it's the Bruce Springsteen theme song to the AIDS movie with Tom Hanks. Yeah. So it's like, so I always pick a different version of that song for anything that she's doing. And so you're watching this trajectory of these gays who, for a variety of reasons, do not have the education, right? So you have to always preface a lot of this complaint within our community to come from a place of understanding. You have to remember that we didn't get taught how to be gay. Right. And we didn't get any formal training. And some people just don't have the lessons. There's some of these kids that are literally 21 spewing all this crazy shit. And you're like, you're in that part of being gay. Like, you don't know you hate yourself, and you don't know how to control your sexuality, and you don't know how to live in your 22-year-old gay body. And so you have blamed our community. And so you went to some other side. And throughout our history, we've done that. Like, as gay people, there was gay Republicans in the 80s during Reagan. Didn't turn out so well for them. There was always community infighting during like the 60s, for example, where 1950s and 40s gays were telling the 60s gays, like, why do you have to be so open about everything? Right. You're destroying everything that we built. So this is that moment, right? And so there's these gays on there that have no sense of history and that have no context of it. So they don't understand that, like, Trump and that machine is always going to kill you. Like, it's always going to be there. Like, it will hold you up like a token as long as it needs you. And then when the time comes, Lady Maga, you will get yelled at on the street and you will get shamed by these Proud Boys, and nobody's going to come to your rescue.
They screamed shame at her.
Shame. That's disgusting. And it's like, that's where the heart of that is. Like, that's where the heart of where you're in is. And I think there is a level of narcissism involved because you get to be the only one. Like, you see that in a lot of minorities that show up in these things where it's like, you get to be the first. Of course, you're the only. Who doesn't want to be? And I've done drag, so I can say this. Which drag queen doesn't want to be the only drag queen in a 2-mile radius with people lining up taking pictures with her? Like,
oh my God, I never even thought of it that way, because she doesn't get that validation from the drag community because she's bad.
Well, and so when these people, and so I've studied all of these MAGAs, and there's the pattern.
Okay, coin a term.
Right. So these MAGA, there's a lot of there's these common themes with them, and it's always about being ignored by the community. There's this level of like, nobody wanted to fuck me. Nobody wants to pay attention to me. I was an ugly duckling kid, right? There's that part of it. Then there's money. There's a lot of it comes down to money. A lot of these MAGAs are of a certain class, and they're complaining about taxes, which to me, I'm like, you fucking bitch. There's kids in cages and people dying of COVID, and you're talking about taxes. So there's a disconnect there. And then there's just the level of loneliness that comes from just being gay in general. And at some point, they sort of expose themselves as conservative thinking. And because we don't have those systems in place, we don't have room for them in our community. Right. It's just created this perfect storm. And you sort of want to be like, girl, like, we did a pandemic before. Like, they're not making this up. Like, this isn't a hoax. Like, they will let you die. Like, they will let people die. Like, we've done this. But I'm not expecting a Lady Maga to have any trans friends of color. I'm not expecting her to have a lot of older gay men to talk to. She has a lot of the MAGAs have really intense transphobic thinking. Like, she has a whole thing about nonsensical transgenderism, and it gets really intense. And part of why I started to study that is because, and some of my friends were like, we're worried about your mental health going into these like MAGA holes and whatever. And it's like, girl, those kids are showing up at our Pride, and they're going to make sure that they are seen and heard at our Pride. They've already been doing marches. They did one in West Hollywood. Like, there's a level of indoctrination that is happening with this MAGA thing that we all, it's like cult light for a lot of people. And so they're perfect targets. And so, Lady MAGA, for example, Mormon, Utah, drag queen who was left, drag queens can be really mean. I don't know if you guys have heard this, but drag queens can be really mean.
Oh my God, can they?
I know, I've never.
It makes sense
so,
that she, I never, I don't want to say the word is empathized for her.
No, you should empathize. Maybe sympathy is not the word, but empathy, because we need to understand where this is coming from, because it's only going to grow and it's only going to get bigger.
And it's exactly what you said about like coming to the prides, because then the goes like, oh, well, we want to march here too.
Yes.
Oh, but I thought pride is all about love. I thought pride
inclusivity.
Exactly. And so it's like
but when the message that you're trying to send is hate, then we're
But it's not though, because Lady MAGA is all about rainbows and she's got that Mariah Carey
but that's
thing.
My issue with her is that she's she seemed to get mad at that group of Proud Boys that was yelling at her and saying that. And she was like, those aren't the MAGA people that I want to be around. But I was like, it seems like it is, because you traveled there. Like, you're out of state. You went to go be a part of that group. So when you get to decide that you're a part of it or that they're bad versions of it is only how it affects you. Like, I don't understand that.
It's almost like people don't remember that, like, when you're in a large group like that, like, sometimes like the heart of this group is almost in its worst members in a way, right? So it's like if they're the weak spot. So it's like, I've seen so many MAGA rallies and a lot of them look like they're having a great time, right? There is a sense of community. There is a sense of whatever. It's a fucking hoodless Klan rally, but it leaves a lot of room for minorities and for open thinking, and it's the Constitution. So you get to cherry pick your way through those if you want, right? And she has a really interesting way of always she goes right for the minorities. It's always like, I found a Mexican, like I found an Asian, I found a black guy, can you talk to me? Like, it's always that with her.
Oh wow.
But they all do that. So that's where the lack of historical context comes in, because anecdotal doesn't mean that it's not systemic. And so a lot of MAGA people will point out a Lady MAGA who becomes the token gay. So we're not homophobic because look at us taking a picture with a drag queen.
Look at that dude over there.
Right? But then you have this faction that we saw this last week that we've all known was there.
Of course.
But now you see them taking a shit in the Capitol and like, how are you going to excuse it? So that night...
she was there.
I know. And that's what's part of my story on the Magays. When you click on Herrera images, she's there. And I was like, okay, I don't want to comment on everything because first of all, I've done so many MAGA things. And there was like a truckers strike that nobody heard about that I have in my series where it's like, they had this whole trucker strike planned on TikTok that completely bombed. That is hilarious.
Right.
And, I thought a lot of that stuff in the Capitol was just really, really sad. And it wasn't funny. And a lot of people that had like made fun of these MAGA people for the last year was like, that was really sad. And it was just like really disturbing. But I was like, let me check up on this bitch. And, and she's, because this is the other rally too. So she's like in this rally and the rallies are getting darker, they're getting scarier and people are reporting that they're getting scarier. So before this last one, she's there and this thing happens with this guy named Nick Fuentes. He's some 22-year-old alt-right little monster who has been given way too much oxygen. And he is the heart of that movement in a lot of ways, right? Mm-hmm. So she has that thing with him and I am just following her live, feed. And she gets home and she has this really sad moment where she's in a hotel room by herself and she's basically like crying about how much she loves her country. And I'm totally empathizing by what she's saying, but I'm like, but boo-boo, you picked the wrong side.
Yeah.
And I know that you might have felt alone in our side, and rightfully so, because I don't got fucking time for some white bitch when there's fucking kids in cages and black women dying of COVID at crazy rates. Like, we don't have time for your realizations. But I could see that in your eyes, you're working from love. And, you really do believe that. And the language and the messaging has gotten so twisted that you really thought that a person like you is going to be safe in these spaces. And they were never built for you. And they will bail on you at the first moment. And you're going to have to realize at the end of this that you were behind something that was antithetical to everything that you are. And that's a really hard thing for people to wrap their head around.
Right.
But that's what makes her so fucking campy and hilarious, because she's clueless to it.
Yeah.
So she's this character study like a lot of these kids are, where it's like, the sadness, I think, for us is that we recognize all of it. And going back to the PV gays, my post was like, we get why you're there. We get it, queen. Like, we get that thing. But we all have to learn these really shitty lessons, because they're life or death lessons. Like, you could have been killed at that thing, Lady Maga.
Yeah.
You know,
completely.
Like,
wow.
if you had been in the Capitol building, huh?
It's my understanding, like, that she's going to these alone. Like, no one's coming with her. She's going.
She's got a Prince Charming, and she's always got, like, you know.
Oh, does
her
she?
little fag hag?
Oh,
yeah.
I thought she was going alone, which made it even worse for me. I was like,
well, she was walking alone the night of the Capitol. She was like live, you know, treating like, oh, I hope no Antifa is here to hurt me. And I was like, girl, Antifa's
it's not Antifa.
Like,
we're going to hurt you with words. They have guns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They let you go.
So it's really like, it's sad.
Yeah.
It is sad. Well,
is there a place where you lecture or teach a course, like on the regular, where people can tune in? I mean, Jesus, I feel like it's so fascinating to hear your perspective on everything.
Did I just do that? I don't know.
Well, no,
I don't know. I'm working on that.
Just saying, like, at the end of it, like, for us to like have all of these conversations, see what I feel like is the truth in like the, you know, the connections and the hypocrisy and all of this political stuff. And then for you to end it saying, you know, that you see that she's coming from a place of love and you empathize. It's like, that is a very, you know, like, mature. To see the humanity in her and other people, I think is a really important thing that we have to do, and it's one of the hardest things to do, because we're seeing people violently attack, you know, what we think is important, whether in their passive behavior or in their active behavior, and to try to see past it and see within their humanity, I think is the only way forward.
I think it's very, very, very difficult to be gay and to grow up gay. And I think it fucks every single one of us up in really specific ways, and in ways that are also really, really beautiful. And I call it the unmistakable softness, which is this thing that you see in children. You know, one of my favorite things is seeing pictures of all of my friends is when they're like 4. And they're like reclined with their little hands up, or like, you know, little toe up. Like, we all have that. And the way that our system and our you know, our world is built, it's built to destroy that so early on. And we sort of grow bent in these really different ways. And if you don't go back to that with everybody, including the idiots on the boat in PV, including, like, you know, gay closeted Republicans, if you don't go back to that to find where that source of truth is, then you also do a disservice to yourself, and all you're doing is shaming people for something that you recognize within yourself. And I think that that's where a lot of the reaction to my post and the PV gays thing was, where it was like, we know why you're there. And that's where the reaction to a lot of my work comes from. And I think that's where, when we all, you know, because I'm talking to 2 artists here, when we operate from that level of love, and from what drag comes from, and from all of that, then you sort of do get to why people do the stuff they do. It's not that hard, though. Like, it's not that difficult. And you can understand sort of anybody when you think about, like, even the worst MAGA people, you can sort of see where they're coming from, right? It's not about them hating me. It's that they hate that their daughter is jobless and, you know, struggling so bad. Like, with gay people, it's such a specific trauma. It's such this, like, battle that we have with ourselves so early on. And it's this beating up of ourselves that we do, and this battle against nature that we have, and this war that we live with ourselves that is really, really specific to our people. And so it sort of creates these, it creates like, I hate to say the word rainbow. I just totally killed that.
No!
But it creates these well, no, because it creates like a palette, like primary colors, you know, like that's why we split ourselves into these like factions. And that's why a lot of these gays that go to circuit parties, they're battling some kind of trauma, you know, like and the drag queens are battling another kind of trauma. And, you know, we're all sort of choosing this different path. The idea, and sort of to finish this off with, is that your path cannot destroy somebody else's. You know, like, and that's the thing that we have with the Meg gays and the PV gays. Like, this is where this joins, is like your path is putting other people's in danger. Lady Maga, you being out there giving people the excuse of being like, I can't be homophobic. I just took a picture with a drag queen, so let me vote for these insanely transphobic laws. You're giving people permission to do that. Same thing with these gays in Puerto Vallarta. You're giving permission to other people to do certain things in a pandemic. So that's when you sort of have to come in and be like, not so fast, bitch. Right. And then you have to use humor and empathy, and it's not easy for everybody to do. But these are important conversations for us to have.
Totally. And we appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. This was amazing.
Okay, so important things to know. Instagram, you are Herrera Images, Herrera Images. And to check out the Fathers Project, the website is iftheylived.org. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes. And
theylived.org, honey. There's a fisting scene in the middle of it, baby.
There's also like
it was in slow-mo too, and you can see that lube sliding off his arm.
Honey. That's
now,
it.
Do you know if that lube was the sugar-based lube for animals?
No, it's the kind of lube that you have to like make. The powdered lube that it's like the one that you like. It's serious.
And it comes in the water bottle. I've seen it at CCBC.
No, she knows. She's in the know.
There's also this really amazing like little mini doc about you and the creation of the project that's on that website too, which is just really enlightening and great. So thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for being here. This was so fun.
Just light conversation.
No. I know, but honestly, it's very nice to hear someone who isn't like yelling at you their opinion on TV, and it's not your own thoughts swirling in your brain. Right. So I really appreciated this conversation, and I think our listeners will too. That's it. Meatball.
So thanks for listening so much to Sloppy Seconds. You can follow us on Instagram at SloppyPod. Send us an email at sloppysecondspod@gmail.com or call in with a fuck talk story to 213-536-9180.
You can follow me at Big Dipper Jelly. You can follow Spicy as Meatball on Instagram or Fat Drag Meatball on Twitter. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't ever miss an episode, which come out every Tuesday and Friday. Okay.
I didn't do a single Wicked riff.
You just did. You just did.
I know, but we'll edit it out and then they'll never hear it.
Moments ago, you just
Ooh.
did. Okay. Bye.
Doodle-doo-doo. Forever dog. To listen to Sloppy Seconds ad-free and one day early, sign up for Forever Dog Plus at foreverdogpodcast.com/plus.
Sloppy Seconds is produced by Forever Dog and Moguls of Media, a.k.a. M.O.M.
Hosted by Big Dipper and Meatball. Music, editing, and sound design by William Pitts.
Executive produced by Willem Belli, Alaska Thunderfuck, Joe Cilio, Brett Boehm, and Alex Ramsey.
Our artwork was drawn by Christian Cimarroni.
And our theme song was written by Mike Malarkey.